it's one of these things where it's like, once people figure it out and they start to understand what it is, they're like, wow, I definitely want some. That's really interesting.
How can Bitcoin be used to protect savings and investments, particularly in an era of monetary easing and growing inflation? This is a question that I posed to Alex Gladstein in a recent episode of my podcast, Solutions with David Ansara. What follows is a short extract from our longer conversation. If you would like to watch the full discussion with Alex Gladstein, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description below. Enjoy. But I think another very important aspect of cryptocurrencies is that it's a form of digital property rights. And that is very much inextricably linked with human rights, a way of protecting your assets, your savings from extractive elites or government officials or even corporate interests that might want to threaten your livelihood or your savings. Could you talk about that relationship between property rights and human rights and how technologies like Bitcoin play a role in that?
Sure. Well, I mean, look, money is really the tool that you use to transform your time and energy into something that you can preserve for the future, right? You would transform your labor into something that can then be used to pay for other things or to be saved for the future. And for most people around the world, their money, their ability to transform their labor and effort and energy and sweat and tears into something that can be spent or given away to family or invested in is really poor. Like that technology that they have access to sucks. Like the Naira in Nigeria, a country of 200 plus million people, has 15% plus CPI and has 20 to 30% food inflation. And, so you got people laboring for this currency and it is literally like disappearing in front of them. And that's even a rather mild case. I mean, you look at a place like Iran, which, or Argentina, which have had inflation topping 50%.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Or you look at something like Sudan, which has 300% inflation, similar to Lebanon or Syria. And then you can even go back and look at Zimbabwe, which obviously, I'm sure most South Africans are intimately familiar with. And look at the fact that their government, completely destroyed the currency there to smithereens. Everyone's seen the $100 trillion notes. So, I one time brought a Zimbabwean activist to the United States, and we did an event on hyperinflation, and he showed the crowd how he wore a 1980 Zimbabwean dollar around his neck, like as a necklace, as an example of what the economy used to be. And he was telling us that in 1980, the Zimbabwean dollar bought 2 British pounds. And through the policies of Mugabe, the rent seeking was so extraordinary that the value was sucked out of that technology, out of that monetary technology, so much into the elite and into like a handful of special interests that what was left over was just a husk, a few decades later. It's really extraordinary to see. So, all around the world, this monetary technology is fed on by parasites, essentially, and it's depleted to different degrees. And Bitcoin is a money that is immune to such attacks. There's no such parasite that can leach its value over time. It is a free market phenomenon, meaning it goes up and down according to market interest. And that's obviously quite volatile. It's poorly understood. Only, maybe 2% of the world has ever used it. You can expect huge volatility moving forward. But generally speaking, it's one of these things where it's like, once people figure it out and they start to understand what it is, they're like, wow, I definitely want some. That's really interesting. And again, it doesn't have like the guardrails that fiat money has. So for better or worse, it doesn't have the Fed behind it that at times when the dollar's looking weak, the Fed can come in and debt monetize, right? It doesn't really have that stuff. But what it has is just this relentless neutrality. Like nobody can change its rules. And it results in a time frame and in a phenomenon where, again, it's volatile enough that the average person doesn't really take it seriously sometimes, because they look at it and they're like, oh, well, like this thing is just like useless. I mean, how can you use a currency that goes down 50%? This is like what they lead themselves to believe. What they don't like stop to think about is like, okay, sure, Bitcoin's down 50% from October, but it's up 4x in the last 18 months. People just allow themselves to be gaslit by recent events. It's truly amazing. How else can one explain the fact that this thing has gone from zero to, essentially $1 trillion, or from, zero to whatever it is, $38,000 over the last 12 years. And everybody thinks that it's stupid, or that its promoters are religious and crazy and stuff like that. There's something weird going on here. But it has not been lost on millions of people in emerging markets. Like out of necessity, they're using it, whether it be to do remittances. I mean, if you think about this, like the average payment from Europe or America to sub-Saharan Africa costs 7%. Okay, they take 7% on a $200 or $500 remittance. Okay, well, you use Bitcoin and you use what's called the Lightning Network, which is a way of using Bitcoin instantly and cheap, instantly and essentially for free, for like a tiny fraction of a penny you pay as a fee. Then you can move $500 instantly without permission, without using the banking system, from a user in Paris or Chicago to a user in Joburg. Like you can move $500 instantly. Now, what does the user in Joburg do with that $500? That's up to them. Do they want to save it for the next 5 years and watch it grow? Or do they want to just sell it using a service like Paxful or local Bitcoins for Rand? And they can do that within minutes. So, I mean, people have options. Maybe they want to sell it for Tether. You can easily do that too. Set up a whatever Binance account or God knows what. There's a million different services. So people have freedoms now where they can receive a remittance or a payment, and they can choose whether to hold it in Bitcoin or to peg it to the dollar in a variety of different ways. So, once you start going into this system, it's like no surprise that people are over time, fleeing the old system and going to the new one. The old one is exclusionary, extortionate, and repressive. I mean, if you think about, it's just kind of funny that like these like pension funds and large institutions are holding all this like in real terms negative yielding government debt. You're holding. It's just the psychology of it is so funny to me. Like the U.S. government debt is considered the risk-free asset in the world. I'm like, okay. So currently inflation is 7% and interest rates are like around 1%. Okay, so you're telling me that the risk-free asset is guaranteed to lose 6%. This is just crazy. So what you're going to see over the next decade is like, in my opinion, the idea of like the risk-free asset move from US treasuries to Bitcoin, like over time. Like you're going to see people realize that like in a deep sense, Bitcoin is the risk-free asset. It's going to take a long time for people to figure that out. Maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, but it's clouded, it's shrouded by its adoption process, which is, again, there's no guardrails on it, and it's completely open and global and 24/7. So, but what you're watching, if you look at a logarithmic scale of Bitcoin's price, you're watching the monetization of a new asset. And this is, again, just to underline, this has not been lost on people in emerging markets, and it has not been lost on human rights defenders who've had their bank accounts frozen and need a way to receive donations. It's not been lost on people who live behind sanctions, who unfairly are not allowed to buy iPhones or work for Microsoft simply because they live in a place like Iran or whatever. It's not been lost on people in Cuba who need to get money back and forth to their family in Miami, but the US government prevents them from doing so. It's not been lost on a lot of people. So, sadly, ironically, like the communities where it's really been lost on are the privileged communities, are the people who watch financial media and read the Financial Times and read the New York Times. And they've imbibed this propaganda that Bitcoin is like risky and dangerous, when in reality, it's been risky and dangerous to not learn about or buy Bitcoin over the last decade. So it's kind of a weird thing. But the reality, what the result is that when it comes to Bitcoin specifically, the capital is not San Francisco. No, the capital is maybe Lagos, or the capital is maybe Buenos Aires. So in terms of innovation, where the products are, where all the stuff's coming out, that's kind of what's happening. Like the innovation's happening kind of more on the edge as opposed to at the center. So I've observed that, and that's been very interesting to watch.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this discussion, why don't you watch the full interview with Alex Gladstein? That's linked over here. I'd also be grateful if you could subscribe to my other channel. That's linked over here. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.